Welcome to Yerba Talks.
Welcome. We have something different today. I am Max. This is Kat. And we have Dan as our guest today. Our intention today is to clear up a big confusion that happened during one of our last after shows on the Y chromosome that Donnie kept going over and over and over. So before we get into that, thank you so much, Dan. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and we'll go from there.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to talk about Y chromosome stuff. So my name is Dan. I'm an evolutionary biologist. My PhD is in genetics and microbiology. My kind of research specialty was viral evolution. And my channel is called Creation Myths, where I talk about the claims of scientific creationism and why they're all wrong.
Oh, that is super interesting. The link to the channel is on the title of the stream. And let me check if I added it. I didn't add it to the description, but I'll add it now afterwards. So I prepared a little clip of what Donnie said during his opening in the debate to refresh our minds and to let Dan know what puzzled us as laymen that we are in this topic in particular. So let's go here, and here we go. Oh, did it... I recorded it mute. Give me 1 second. I'll have to share it from the YouTube. One moment.
It's so funny. The figure that he showed, I know exactly what this is going to be. I've heard this a million times because that man does not change his script no matter what the topic is.
Sounds a little bit familiar. We deal a lot with flat earthers, and that's what they do also.
To a common ancestor roughly 6 to 7 million years ago, then that means humans and strawberries or humans and banana plants are definitely not related. So I like to stick as close to home as possible. The evolutionist argues that chimpanzees are our closest cousin, and that we can be traced back to a common ancestor roughly 6 to 7 million years ago. And so let's show why that is not true. Let's start with the Y chromosome. Now, our interlocutors here, as you can see already in the opening statement, they want to focus on all the similarities, but then ignore or dodge the major differences. I want people to remember this. It's the differences that make all the difference. We can explain similarities as common design proponents. Evolutionists can explain the similarities, but it's the differences that make all the difference. When we have massive discontinuities or dissimilarities, that's where the evolutionist struggles, but that's where we excel because that's exactly what we would expect if separate ancestry is true. So notice this in the conventional literature. So we got the Y chromosomes of humans and chimpanzee, or of the great apes. And when you consider overall architecture, size differences, and gene content, the human Y and chimpanzee Y are less than 30% the same. You can see that the chimpanzee Y is half the size. It's lost apparently the entirety of its heterochromatic arm. How do our interlocutors explain that? Heterochromatin is dense, tightly packed DNA that used to be considered inert. But we know that it plays vital roles in nuclear organization, chromosomal stability, and gene silencing. Now, this again, right from...
All right. What does he mean? What is all of this? Because this is way beyond my skills.
So let's just start by pointing out what he's doing here, right? So Donnie is not a biologist. He's not a scientist. He doesn't have a background in any of this stuff. what he's doing is throwing out big technical sounding words while pointing to a figure. And he's not like directly using the figure. The whole point is to mystify, right? To impress people with the big sciencey sounding argument. But he's just saying, oh, look, there's these two things are different, and then he uses big words to describe the difference, right? The deletion of the heterochromatic arm of blah, 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 right? And that's like, before we even get into what the argument is, that's just like creation debating 101, because you don't have a good argument to make. So you're obligated to put on a show to make it look like you have a better argument than you actually have. So that's the first thing that's going on here. Because you're very like honest and humble about this, where you're saying, we watched this in an after show and we didn't understand what he was saying. Here's the thing. He doesn't understand what he's saying either. He just doesn't care, right? Because it sounds good. And like him and, his friend Raw Matt and all these other like, YouTube debate bro creationists, they're just cribbing from the professionals without having like an understanding of what the arguments actually are or how they're supposed to work. So like, let's just start there, is that he's just saying big sciencey words to impress people and make people think he knows what he's talking about when he doesn't, right? And that's the first thing we have to point out, right? So then we can get into what he's trying to say. So we can look at his argument at face value, and then we could steel man it and be like, here's what he's trying to do. So he says, it's easy for both models, evolution and creation, to explain the similarities, but the differences, that's what we expect under the creation model, not the evolution model, right? There's too many differences, and the pattern is not compatible with what the evolutionists predict. And then to support that assertion, he's looking at the Y chromosome specifically. Now, he didn't make a good version of that argument, because he only referenced humans and chimps. And just pointing to two things and saying they're different is not an argument against evolution. Two things can be different. That's like evolution happens, and you diverge and you have selection for different environments or conditions, and you could be very different from each other. Like, just the fact that two things are different is not like a creationist argument. What he was trying to convey, and not conveying well, was that the human Y chromosome is more similar to the gorilla Y chromosome compared to the chimp, right? And that's weird, because humans and chimps share a more recent common ancestor than either of them do with gorillas. So you would expect the human and chimp to be more similar, and the gorilla to be kind of the odd man out in that trio. So that's the argument that he was trying to make, but like didn't articulate clearly, because again, he doesn't actually like know the point. He's just saying big words, right? So here's why that's a bad argument. And there's a bunch of other stuff, even in just that tiny little clip we can like parse. There's other stuff in there that doesn't make sense, that's inconsistent. But here's the thing. In order to say that the human and the chimp are more different from each other than the human and gorilla Y chromosomes are, you're only looking at the structure of the chromosome and ignoring the sequence of the actual DNA. That's the trick he's doing. That's the fundamental bait and switch. Because whenever you're comparing two things, whether it's, humans and chimps and gorillas, or different breeds of dog, or like a pair of siblings to a cousin, what you're comparing are the actual DNA sequences. And this is like a very basic thing in genetics, right? You are more similar to your siblings than you are to your cousins. You and your cousins are more similar to each other than any of you are to some random person off the street, right? That's in terms of the sequence of the DNA, and it's because of this metric that we do called the time to most recent common ancestor, TMRCA. It just means how far back do you have to go in the past till you find a common ancestor. The closer that is, the more similar you are genetically, just because of how inheritance works. And everybody agrees on that. Creationists agree on that. Evolutionists, only creationists use that word, but whatever. Evolutionists, right?
Normal people.
Right, we all agree that if you have an an ancestor in the more recent past, you're more similar than if you share an ancestor in the more distant past. Like, this is how Ancestry.com works, right? And this is also how you figure out, like, oh, dogs came from wolves, not foxes. It's the same basic techniques. But then,
and this would get you, for example, convicted if with a DNA sample or something like that, right?
yeah, this is the kind of evidence that holds up in court, right? You're going to isolate, a blood sample from a crime scene or whatever. You're going to sequence the DNA and go, oh, this suspect who we have, his cell phone records had him at the site. His DNA matches the DNA at the crime scene. That dude was probably at the crime scene, right?
Right.
That's admissible evidence in court. This is a whole other aside, but there's a famous case from the 90s with a dentist that, like, when DNA evidence it's a super cool story. Totally irrelevant, but it's a very cool story. Everyone should look it up. The dentist with DNA evidence. Cool story. But yeah, so like everyone agrees on this basic framework of how to determine the degree of relatedness among different things. You compare the sequence of the nucleotides in the DNA, and the general rule is that the more similar you are, the more closely related you are, right?
Yeah.
Everybody agrees on that. Except when Donnie is talking about Y chromosomes, apparently, because we're just going to throw all that out when we're talking about the Y chromosome, and instead we're going to focus on the structure of the chromosome. So, like, how big is it? What parts are present or absent? And the reason we don't use those types of things when we're doing these comparisons to determine degree of relatedness is that you can have big deletions. Like, if you have just a region of a chromosome that's missing, like say you have species A, B, C, D, and A, B, and D have a chromosome that's 1 million nucleotides long. It's 1 million base pairs from one end to the other.
Mm-hmm.
And then species C, for whatever reason, that chromosome is only 800,000 nucleotides. So it's missing 200,000. That's called a deletion, where you're just missing a big chunk.
Mm-hmm.
You don't count that as 200,000 differences. You count that as one difference. It's a deletion. You just, like, for whatever reason, at some point, a big chunk of it just got excised somehow, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a single evolutionary event that happened. It's not like 200,000 individual mutations happening, which would be weird. That would mean, wow, that's a lot of differences. You're going to put that one off to the side. But instead, what you do in a situation like that is you compare the part that they all share, and you compare the sequence for that. So what we can do with humans, gorillas, chimps is, yeah, the chimp and bonobo Y chromosome is way smaller than the human and gorilla and other apes. Okay, there's still a bunch that they share. Let's just sequence it and compare those sequences and see what pattern we get. And when we do that, we get the exact pattern we expect, that humans and chimps are the most similar, and then gorillas are less similar to either of them than they are to each other, which is exactly consistent with what we understand about human evolution and ape evolution. Now, of course, if you're a creationist arguing on MDD, you can't just, like, acknowledge that. So you have to come up with another metric to try to make it look like that isn't the case, right? And so what Donnie's doing here, and other creationists do this as well, is just in this scenario, we're going to ignore the sequence, and we're going to look at the structure of the chromosomes instead and use that as our metric.
Okay. He talked about the heterochromatin. Could you give me a rundown of what is that?
Yes, and just a heads up for anybody who might encounter Donnie and he makes an argument like this, ask him to define what the heterochromatin is, because I spoke to him a few years ago, and I have this video on my channel somewhere, where he was making an argument similar to this. It was with the chromosome 2 fusion rather than the Y chromosome, I think, but it was a similar argument. He referenced heterochromatin, and I said, okay, time out, explain to me what that means. And he couldn't do it. He just waffled for a couple minutes and did not know what the word means. I don't know if he's remedied that. I will say he did define it correctly in the clip. That doesn't mean he actually understands what the words mean, but he did at least define it correctly that time, which is good. So heterochromatin, in order to make sense of that, we got to take a step back. So take a eukaryotic cell. Those are, like, we are eukaryotes. Those are cells with nuclei, are eukaryotic cells. as
Yes.
opposed to prokaryotes, which are cells with no nuclei, bacteria and archaea. Right? So eukaryotes, cells with nuclei. Within the nucleus, you've got a lot of DNA packed in there. For humans, if you were to take all the DNA in a single cell and just unwind it, so it's just that double helix, and you just take all the chromosomes and you lay them out, and you lay them out end to end, you're going to be about like 6 feet of DNA, like
Wow.
per nucleus. So that's a lot. So
Yeah.
you have to condense it so that each cell is only actually using the parts that it needs to be a muscle cell or a white blood cell or whatever, right? So the rest of the DNA, the stuff that you're not using, is going to be condensed into this supercoiled form. So you've got your double helix of DNA, and then that's going to kind of
Right.
zigzag back and forth, and then that fiber is going to kind of wrap around on itself, and you get this really dense, tightly wound DNA with proteins called histones. Now that form that's really densely packed, that's called heterochromatin. And the thing with heterochromatin is that you can't do anything with it. It's you need proteins to get into there and interact with the DNA in order to express the genes. You need proteins to be able to grab onto the DNA in order to regulate the genes.
Okay.
In heterochromatin, you can't do that. So regions that are persistent heterochromatin, that's evidence that those regions aren't doing anything. If you have a region that's heterochromatin, it means it's probably not doing much.
Right.
And that's what he's saying was deleted in the Y chromosome. So if you're looking at the I don't know if you could pull that video up again, and you could just pause with that figure up, and we could just look at it for a second.
In the kitchen.
Yeah, perfect, right there. So check this out. So all the way on the left, on the human Y chromosome there, that light gray region down at the bottom, that I think that's the heterochromatin region. If you hop over 2 chromosomes to that really tiny one, you'll see that the chimp chromosome is missing that part.
Right.
That's the densely packaged part of the chromosome that's like not doing a whole lot. So the fact that that could get deleted and it still works fine means it probably wasn't doing a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
So like in terms of the evolution of that region or those chromosomes, kind of who cares about that part of it? Heterochromatin's not active. Now Donnie tries to say like we now know heterochromatin is doing it. No, we don't. He's wrong.
Okay.
Like he's just wrong. And we could, because that
Right.
gets into the junk DNA argument, and I'd be oh so happy to talk about that too if you wanted. That's a separate thing from the little bait and switch he's trying to do here, which comes down to using the sequence using the structure rather than the sequence, right? But
Yeah.
what the heterochromatin is that region that's persistently tightly packaged, which means biochemically it's relatively inactive. There's not going to be like active genes that are being expressed that are doing a whole lot there. It's just kind of sitting there, and you package it up real densely so it's not in the way.
Fine. Okay. So it does seem that it's pulling out of all of the dishonest debate tactics, just lie and talk about stuff that is not real. We are very familiar with that.
It's very, I mean, if anybody's familiar with Standing for Truth, like they are just, you could play bingo with the debate tactics, right? When you watch their streams or watch their debates, it's a Gish Gallop, it's this, it's that. You could totally just go through it. And you can see that on display here. And the one that trips people up, because one thing Donnie is really good at is using big words that if you're not a specialist, you probably won't know.
Right.
The thing that he's doing here is he's making it sound really good, right? Oh, there's a deletion in the heterochromatic arm that the chimps have, but then the humans and the gorillas are the same. And okay, what does that mean and why does it matter in an evolutionary sense? How does that actually affect the physiology? How does it affect the evolutionary trajectory? And because it's heterochromatin, the answer is it might not be doing that much.
Right.
Now, there is evidence. Oh, go ahead.
That's exactly what happened in this debate. Flying Spaghetti Auditor and Austin Sims are not specialists, And Donnie just kept going back and back to the same thing and repeating the mantra, what about the Y chromosome and the Y chromosome, and then started counting his victories throughout the whole debate. It was a mess.
Well, that is the strategy, right? So you do a Gish Gallop, you make 10 crappy arguments, and if your opponents can respond to 9 of them quickly and effectively, then you focus on the 10th one over and over and over again, right? That's how it works. And so it's incumbent upon people who are going to debate these guys to know that that's what they're going to do, know what they're going to say, and be ready to hit every single one of those arguments, right? That's like the thing, because if you can do that, then the Gish Gallop doesn't work, right? But you have to be able to, you have to have like a one-liner to shut down each argument. Like for the chromosome thing right here, the 10-second, 20-second version is, Donnie, that's only true if you're comparing structure rather than sequence. Every other comparison everybody makes is according to sequence rather than structure. Why chromosomes in apes get a special standard all to themselves, right? There you go. That's it. But if you don't know that, then it's going to be a convincing argument, right? Because they could just say it over and over again and tag on to the end, and the evolutionists have no response. So you have to be able to, right?
Which is what he did, and he also went with the 5Ds of evolution.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
So I'll give you kind of an example of how silly this standard is, right? Using the structure standard rather than a sequence comparison. I'll give you an example. So there's this paper from 2023 looking at a complete sequence. We say a telomere to telomere sequence. So a complete sequence of a reference genome for Han Chinese, right? So it's from a Han Chinese population. And there are structural differences in that Y chromosome. The sequence is, virtually identical to every other human Y chromosome sequence, right? But there are structural differences because the Y chromosome, for reasons, is weird, and the human Y chromosome is probably shrinking, is my understanding. So you see deletions in the Y chromosome. So in this particular paper, in the Y chromosome, there are significant deletions. Whereas if you were to use that standard, you would get this genome as this like giant outlier compared to all other human genomes. But if you compare the sequence, it's right in line with all the other human genomes. Why would we use the structure of the Y chromosome to make that comparison? That's stupid. Why would we use that like different standard out of nowhere for no reason? We shouldn't. It's dumb.
I've had a doubt for the longest time from a debate I had a long time ago with a guy called Evidence of God. And he made the argument and brought up a paper of the human Y chromosome disappearing or so. Is this kind of what you mentioned here in passing that they talk about also? I wouldn't call it a consensus. There is an argument to be made that there is a trend towards reduction in the human Y chromosome. I'm not well versed in it to be convinced one way or the other. But there is an argument to be made that the trend is for reducing the Y chromosome. So there's different systems of sex determination, and species can like switch from one system to another over periods of time. So there's like, you have like an XY system where it's XX versus XY. So you could be what's called homogametic versus heterogametic. That's what we have. But other species have an XO system where it's XX versus, basically you have two X's versus one X, and like that's it. And so there is an argument that some people make that humans are moving in that direction. That is the trend of like reducing the Y chromosome. I'm going to revise what I said a minute ago. I don't think I buy that, but I can see the evidence. You can see that, like, I can accept that the trend might be there. I don't think we'll reach the end point. But I can see why people would make that case, even though I think disagree with it. Yeah. That's, yeah. So Sorry
that's
about
like,
the tangent. I've had
all
that doubt
good,
for the longest time.
So, let's see. So what? Oh, okay. So we've talked about how it's heterochromatin, it's structural, it's not a sequence comparison. When you do the sequence comparison, it's it's exactly the pattern you would expect. So let's talk about, there was something else Donnie said that was really interesting in there that just kind of snuck it in there, but it's worth untangling a little bit, and it's about predictions and which model expects different things, right? So he says that these level of differences, this is what creationism predicts or expects, right? He says we creationists expect the differences. So specifically what he said was, evolution can explain the similarities with common ancestry, and creation, we can explain the similarities with common design, but I think he said it's like the differences or what make the difference or something.
It's the differences that make the difference.
Yeah.
Yes, that was his mantra.
Okay, great. So two things there. One, he's contradicting himself in the span of like 45 seconds in that clip, because he starts off by saying, your model explains the similarities, my model explains the similarities. And then in the next thing he says is, you can't explain the differences, but my model predicts the differences. Okay, which is it? Does your model predict things are the same? Or does it predict that they're going to be different, Donnie? Because you just said both of those things. And what that really reveals is that his model is unfalsifiable, right? There's no observation that you could point to where Donnie would accept, yes, that is contradictory with a prediction of my model, right? There's literally nothing that would make him say that. And that's true for, and that's not just him, that's true for any creationist, right?
Right.
So that's always worth pointing out. And like, this is something that I've started to lean on a lot when I'm interacting with creationists, of just like, what observation would be incompatible with the thing you are proposing? And it might take a long time. Like earlier this year, I had a back and forth with this guy, Dr. Rob Stadler, who, he's a creationist. As far as I can tell, he's a young earth creationist. He kind of does the intelligent design thing, but all his arguments are like young earth creationist arguments. And literally it took weeks of like asking the question in all different ways. But finally, I said, like, is there something here that is not possible there? Like, is there something that could happen at this end that would then render something at this end impossible? And his answer was no. And it was like, great. Then you could just say God did it and it's totally unfalsifiable, and now we're not doing science. And Donnie tipped his hand a little bit there, doing the same thing. And it's always, always, always worth pointing that out in a debate when you say, hey, you just defined your position as unfalsifiable right there. So that's when it comes to like the prediction side of things, he just snuck it in there just that little bit, but that's worth catching and pointing out, because once they do that, then, okay, you're welcome to believe whatever you want, but God, as someone in the chat said, God did it is not a model, and God did it is not testable.
That slipped by through the whole debate and through everyone that was in the after show with us. That slipped by all of us. It's very sneaky.
It's very subtle.
Realize.
It's very subtle. And I will say that I caught it because I have spent way too much time on this in my life. There's stuff. It's like, wait a minute, I saw what you just did there. And so this matters because it goes to kind of a related thing he said, where he, of course, brings up, common design, right? You have separate creation with a common designer, and that explains the similarities, right? And evolution can explain the similarities, but evolution can't explain the differences. And that statement right there, if it was me, I'd be like, time out. I'm going to hammer you on that for as long as you'll give me, right? Because if you're going to say evolution can't explain the differences, then you do not, either you're lying about evolutionary theory or you don't understand evolutionary theory. It's one of those two things. I don't know which it is for Donnie, but like, it's actually the pattern of both similarities and differences that's the strongest evidence for evolution. Right. And it's the creation model that's unable to explain that pattern. And this is another one that is just a complete, like, this is a debate ender, because you get on this topic and hammer them on it, and don't let them go, because they'll wiggle around, they'll do the common design thing, they'll contradict themselves with, oh, we can explain the similarities, we predict the differences, right? No. Hold their feet to the fire with this one, because the creation model is incompatible with the specific pattern of similarity that we see. So when Donnie says, we can explain this, you can't, the response is wrong. Not only does evolution explain the pattern, evolution specifically predicts the exact pattern we see. And that same pattern is incompatible with separate creation. And I'm happy to take a few minutes to like dive into this, because this, like, they say this all the time, and the response is, at this point, I think very obvious. Like, everyone should just learn the response and be like, nope, here's why, bing, bing, bing.
Okay.
So here's the response when they go, common design, you can't explain the differences. With a common designer, creating the separate kinds can explain this. Here's the response. One, you start with the pattern of similarities and differences is exactly what evolution predicts. The pattern is called a nested hierarchy, right? Where you've got these two things are the same, and then these are, the next most similar, and then this, and you go up, and that pattern doesn't stop. You could do that with humans, chimps, and gorillas. You could do that with humans and, rhizarians and E. coli, right? You can make that same nested pattern of similarity by comparing different regions of the genomes that are shared across the things you're comparing, right? So, and there's no stopping point. There's no place where that pattern just falls apart, right? And again, that's not just explaining the similarities. That pattern is as much based on the differences as it is on the similarities. So evolution predicts both sides of that coin. Now, the reason creationism can't predict this is because you have an amount of variation in each group of organisms, whether you're looking at vertebrates, mammals, tetrapods, primates, apes, hominins, right? Whatever group you're looking at, you have a level of variation in there that you have to explain. Now, in the evolution model, that variation has an actual evolutionary history. Where you look at the variation that's present in humans, we share some of that variation with chimps because it was present in our common ancestor. Humans and chimps share some of their variation because it was present in the common, or share our stuff with gorillas because it was present in the common ancestor of all three. In a creation model, let's take say like humans and the other apes and like monkeys, right? Separately created groups according to most creationists. Those three groups are going to have independent evolutionary histories that at some point had to come from Noah's family, right? So you've got an effective population size of 6. I think it was 6. I forget. 8. You do 8. Well, it's 8. It's 8.
And 6 daughters.
Yeah. So it's the three daughters-in-law plus Noah and the wife, and I think that effective population. You'd have to do the count, but it was effective population size of like 5-ish individuals, right? It was 8 people, but effective population size of it's N sub E is a different thing. So it's 8 people. But for all the other things we're talking about, it's 2 individuals getting off the ark, right? So the amount of variation you can have in those individuals at every site in the genome, how many alleles can you have is 4. You only get 4, right? 2 in the one, 2 in the other, because they're diploid, so they each have 2 copies of each gene. So you can have 4 variants total. There are genes that exist today, like in humans, that have over 1,000 variants. So in the flood model, right, in the creation model, all of that variation has to accumulate post-flood, right? Within, if you think about each created kind, like within their lane, they each have to evolve all of that variation. It can't be pre-existing because there just aren't enough genomes in the population for all of it to exist.
Right.
Right? So how do you get a hierarchical pattern of similarity when everyone is just randomly mutating to generate the variation? The mutations are uncorrelated with each other, right? The mutations that's going to happen in the humans versus the apes versus the monkeys, those mutations are just stochastic. You can't get a nested hierarchical pattern if all of that variation must accumulate in the separate lineages. which is exactly what the creation model says has to happen. Whereas in the evolution model, a bunch of that variation doesn't happen within each individual lineage. It actually occurred in the common ancestor, and that's why it's shared in the pattern it is. So you can even start with all of the different like arc kinds. You could start with them identical. You could start with them having the nested pattern of similarity, but they don't have the level of variation that we see in the present. Generating that variation is going to obliterate that like preloaded pattern of nested hierarchical similarity. So it's not just that the creation model doesn't predict the pattern of similarities and differences that we see in the modern world. It's that the pattern that we see is incompatible with the creation model. It's a direct refutation of any time a creationist goes, oh, well, common design. No, you absolutely 100% cannot explain the pattern that we see in the modern world.
When I think of this as a lay person, I feel that the requirement, if the flood story, if we grant them the flood story, it would be something akin to hyper evolution. You get so much biodiversity from a very narrow group of both humans and animals that it's they believe on evolution on steroids, pretty much.
That's exactly what it is. And I don't know if you know, if you're familiar with Dr. Joel Duff, but he's talked about this a lot, looking at in particular, the Answers in Genesis kind of account of post-flood biodiversity. And I think he might have actually coined the term hyper-evolution. That might actually be his word. And just like creationists are proposing speciation, which is macroevolution, to be clear, right? Macroevolution is speciation or greater degrees of change, right? So what creationists are proposing is macroevolution at rates that are orders of magnitude faster than what we observe in nature. But all that evolution is happening, but it's all limited to within this lane, within this lane, within that lane. So they want it to happen faster than anyone proposes it happens, but they also want the degree of variation that you can generate to be tightly constrained.
Right. And then it stops because we don't see that right now for some reason.
At some point, the hyper-evolution had to stop. Yeah. At some point, it had to stop. And when that was, I don't know. What you can do is look at, like, historical records of biodiversity. So we know that if you look at, for example, hieroglyphics in Middle Kingdom Egypt, right, which in the young Earth creation model, that's like a few hundred years after the flood. We're talking less than a millennium after the flood. We've got records of all different types of cats. We've got records of all different types of waterfowl. We've got records of all different kinds of raptors, right? If you look at hieroglyphics, they have different things for different species that exist today. So you don't have, 4,000 years from the flood to the present for that hyperevolution. You have maybe 400 years from, it's not even the flood because there's an ice age. You got to get rid of the ice age, and then it's from the ice age to like Middle Kingdom Egypt. Yeah.
Wow, that is so interesting. There is another thing, given that we're touching on the flood, that Donnie, it was raw math. It's the coincidence between, I think it's haplogroups and the amount of people that were in the ark. Could you explain that to me? What
this is?
mean?
Yeah. So I'm laughing because this is so dumb. Here. Can I share my screen? Because I actually have a video on this exact thing on my channel. Just give me a second here to pull it up. This will just take me a second to find the slides. But yeah, it just basically, they don't understand how to read a phylogenetic tree. And that's how they get this 3 haplogroup thing. Because the idea is that you had Noah's son's wives, who had these 3 women. And what they say is that, well, there's 3 what are called haplogroups, basically like kind of clusters of biodiversity within the mitochondrial DNA. And mitochondrial DNA is inherited from your mom, right? So they say the fact that we have these 3 clusters is evidence of those 3 individuals. So let me see. Here we go. I found it. Let me pull this up real fast for you. Here we go. So let me hang on. See if this is going to run. Here we go. Okay. Actually, I think that would be fine if we do it this way. I think that's... Oh, no, that's not going to work for me. Sorry. I just got to set this up so I can see my screen while I'm showing it to you. Sorry for the delay here. We'll do it this way. Okay, we'll do that. There we go. And now I can share this. Okay. Let's share my screen. And we're going to share... What is this? It's fine. We're going to share this right here. Okay. So this is the visuals I used for my video on this exact topic. So the key thing is that this is the proposal, right? That you've got Noah's 3 sons, 1, 2, 3, and then you've got the 3 wives, and those wives are the source of all your mitochondrial DNA in the present. We don't actually have Noah's wives' mitochondrial DNA because sons don't pass it on. It's from it would be women pass it on. So it's the 3 wives here. So those are responsible for your 3 mitochondrial lineages. So basically, this is what we're looking at. You've got Eve, and then at some point you get the 3 wives, and then the tree has these 3 clusters according to creationists, and that is consistent with the arc story, right? So let me just show you the figure right here. So here are the 3 nodes, there, and there. So you've got these 3 branch points in the tree. Those are called nodes. And the creationist claim is that those 3 nodes represent those 3 wives, right? That's and this comes from Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson from Answers in Genesis, who knows better because he has a Harvard PhD. He's just lying. For Donnie and Matt, they don't understand what's going on here. But this guy, the guy that made this figure, he's lying. He's got a PhD from Harvard. He knows what this is, and he's lying about it. Oh. So what's actually going on here is that this is what's called an unrooted tree. So when you root a tree, and I'll just show you the figure, this is an unrooted tree, very simple, where we have species A, B, C, and D, but we're not saying where the ancestor that they share is. We're just measuring the degree of relatedness here, right?
Okay.
Now when you root the tree, depending on where you say the common ancestor is, you're going to get the different pattern of relatedness. So like I'll just put everything up all at once here. So you can root the tree in the middle right here. This is the simplest. You just pick the middle as the root, and then you say, okay, so it branches off to 1 and 2, and then A and B split from 1, and C and D split from 2 right there. So that's like the simplest thing. But you could also put the root, the ancestor, on one of the other branches. So like up here, you could say, well, no, the ancestor is up here on the C branch. So then C branches off first, and then you get to branch point 2 right here, and then D branches off, and the other side of that branch is this internal branch right here to number 1, and then A and B are together all the way at the end over here, right? So this is what we're doing here is we're rooting the tree. This matters because you're giving it an evolutionary direction, right? You're saying this is the past, this is the present, this is the pattern of descent. Creationists point to the unrooted tree and say, oh, look at those nodes in the middle, those represent the wives. 3, and this is the important thing, 3 people who lived at the same time, right? But what does a branch mean? When you go from an unrooted tree to a rooted tree, the branches don't just mean degree of similarity. The branches mean descent, right? So when you translate from the unrooted tree right here to this rooted tree in the top right, what you're saying is that the population that is represented by branch point number 1, that population descended from whatever branch point number 2 is. It's not that they coexisted, 1 and 2, it's that 1 actually descended from 2.
Right.
Or, if you root it in the middle, 1 and 2 both descend from a common ancestor. Or maybe you root it all the way over here on branch A, which means that flips the pattern. Now, instead of 1 descending from 2, if this is where your root is, then 2 has descended from 1. So when you root the tree, you give it an evolutionary direction, right? You're using the pattern of similarity to infer the actual branching pattern historically. Does that make sense?
It does. How do we actually determine that? Is there a mechanism that we can use to determine how to root the tree accurately?
Yes. So there is a mechanism, and I don't think we need to worry about it for this to make sense, to point out why they're wrong here. It's there's a couple different ways you could do it. I don't think it matters for this. The point is just you can do it, because the thing is, with the creationist 3-node thing, it doesn't matter how you root it, they're always wrong. That's the fun part, right? So we could apply this same basic logic to their tree, right? So let's name these nodes A, B, and C, right? So it's A, then B in the middle, and then C. And if we root this tree, can we get the thing that creationists are saying, where you've got 3 individuals coexisting that are equally related to each other, right? That's basically the setup for this. Well, the answer is no. So here is basically the simplified tree. Like this and that are the same thing. We're just simplifying it a lot, but you've got that middle one, that's B right here, is in the middle, and then C at one side, A on the other side. So that's the simplified version. This is still unrooted. So let's root it. Let's give it an evolutionary direction and see if it tells the story creationists want it to tell. Well, here's one way to do it. You can have it, this is the creationist model. This is the prediction. Here's the real data. Do they match? Well, you could root it at a node, right? Like I said, you could take the A branch or the B branch or the C branch, right? And root at those branches. And you get it like this, or like that, or like that. None of those things are compatible with the creation model, because in the A or C root, then B and A are descended from C in a pattern. So it's A is descended from B, which is descended from C. That's not compatible with those 3 wives. C descended from B, descended from A. Not compatible with the 3 wives. Right. A and C descended from B. Not compatible with the 3 wives. Creationists will go, oh, it doesn't have to work that way. You could also do it between the nodes. You could put it like on the AB branch or the BC branch. Okay, that doesn't work either. These are the patterns you get.
Right.
Still doesn't work. So there's no way to interpret that phylogenetic tree as supportive of the flood story. There's just no way to do it. And the professional creationists who claim that are lying about it. The amateurs like Donnie and Matt, they don't know any better. They're just taking what the professionals say and repeating it.
Right.
But it, like, you can't actually do the phylogenetics on the data that creationists use to support the model that they're saying it supports. It's just like, just visually looking at it, you could be like, no, because those lines that connect the nodes mean is descended from. So no matter how you arrange it, you always get one of those wives descended from the other one.
Right, and we don't have any data on the what they're just mentioned as being there, and that's it.
And that's why this is great. It doesn't matter where you root it. No matter where you root it, that tree can't get you the pattern creationists want. No matter how you root it, you can't get this pattern right here. You just can't. They're different. Right. Those are different trees.
That's a very interesting thing. So when they ask, are the 3 haplogroups and the 3 wives just a coincidence? Then the answer was yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a funnier thing to this, which is that if you go back to this tree, it's actually not 3 separate lineages like they want, because this B right here actually has 2 separate groups coming out of it. You've got this really long branch going out this way, and then you've got this little one in here with all the gold arrows, right? Those are 2 separate groups. Right. So it's not even, like, just on its face, this tree is not telling the story that creationists want it to tell. Without any more interpretation other than, like, that middle node isn't doing what creationists say it does.
That is so interesting to actually get the rundown on why it's wrong, because we're very familiar with debates, right? So at face value, it seemed like this is shady.
1, 2, 3. Okay, there's 3 nodes. Yeah, but you have to, again, they're counting on the people they're presenting to, whether it's debate opponents or their audience on their own channels or whatever, they're counting on those people not being able to interpret a phylogenetic tree like this.
Right.
But if you can interpret this tree, you can see immediately that it's just total nonsense what they're saying.
Wow, that is so interesting. Isa, do you have any questions? I had one, but it slipped my mind. I'm trying to get back to it. Isa is one of our co-hosts here.
You're muted.
You are muted, Isa.
Also, you can take the screen down if you want. I think we're done with that.
All right, cool. Thanks. Okay. Pleasure to meet you, Dan.
You too.
That was very exhaustive. It's actually really funny.
Sorry.
Oh no, it's cool. I'm actually doing an associate's degree at community college in science.
Nice.
So it's really funny listening to all this stuff because it's not exactly on the same level, but it's a very similar kind of stuff.
Definitely.
I have to say it's very, very science-based and, talking about all the different kind of cell structures and, we have to do a lot of that stuff. Like I have to talk about, about the nucleus and, and it's interesting you mentioned heterochromatin, like talking about the tightly wound DNA. We have to talk about all of this stuff. It's really Which is really funny because once you get like past the high school level with this, you see just how much the creationists, like this is stuff that I talk about in my intro bio class, like literally bio 1 and bio 2. We talk about how to read a phylogenetic tree, different, DNA packaging and euchromatin versus heterochromatin. And the creationists are constantly getting this stuff wrong. And it's like my freshman college students understand this stuff. Like, what is the problem here, guys? What's interesting is your freshman college students are it's actually doing bio classes are like, because I was going to go into nursing. So these types of classes are actually meant to be really, really hard for most people. It's very, very difficult. There's a lot of memorization. There's a lot of, like understanding physiology and understanding how these systems work. And I think the question that I really want to ask to you is, like we see folks like Bill Nye, the science guy, who's like an educator who tries to make science accessible. How do we make, because like it feels that a lot of this type of science stuff lives in the realm of college. Like when you're in high school, like I took AP Bio, so that was already like college level, science. But it's like, how do we make this stuff more accessible for people who are more lay people? Like when I saw the debate, that was my big critique is like, I'm like, you're talking on a different level where I would say 90% of your audience has no idea what you're talking about because you're speaking like a different language, literally and figuratively. How do we make this more accessible for people to understand science? Because I think this is exactly what like creationists do, is that they learned some of this language and then they're able to kind of like dance around their audiences because their audiences don't know what they're saying, but they're like, oh, they sound smart. So that what they're saying has to be true. They're speaking the same way that these scientists speak. So it has to be true what's going on. So I'm wondering, what would you say is the best way to make this information more accessible for people outside of college?
Yeah. So there's kind of two levels to this, I think. The first is just the basic science communication stuff. Bill Nye is like obviously the poster child for like, I want to sit and watch this TV show and it's fun and it's interesting. And also I'm learning this cool science stuff, right? Like we all had something like that as a kid. And that's, we're interested in this stuff, right? There's a show that I remember, one of those Saturday morning shows when I was a kid called Beekman's Lab.
Yes!
And okay, you remember Beekman's Lab. Beekman's Lab was fantastic. And, it was me and my siblings and my dad, and we would, like, try to do, the experiments, like, along with it on TV. We'd try to, like, do the demos in our kitchen and stuff. And it was fantastic. I loved it, right?
Where you had the strange hair, Beekman's World. The
big
strange
hair.
The big rat, and the big rat guy. Yeah, Lester the rat. Yeah, right? So, with that stuff, and chat, sorry, that was me typing. I apologize. I was taking notes and I forgot to mute myself while I was taking notes. Sorry.
No problem.
So, like, on the science communication side, there are people doing an absolutely fantastic job with this, right? Making it clear and accessible and interesting. And you look, for example, at I know he does like a lot of like debate and like smacking down creationists and stuff, but like if you just look at like Professor Dave's just like straight science
Mm-hmm.
education stuff, it's fantastic. It's great, right? It's accessible, it's clear, it's well presented, you know, it gets you in the door, right? Guts at Gibbon, Erica does a fantastic job of this. When she's not busting on creationists, she's doing, you know, human evolution and paleoanthropology education, and it's clear, it's entertaining. You've got these beautiful, you know, illustrations and everything, right? All the art. There are people doing this. The problem is doing that is never going to pull like Joe Rogan numbers, right? It's just not.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, and that's and like, I try really hard in my classes to make it like accessible and fun and like interesting and connect it to something in your life specifically. So when we do Mendelian genetics and then we talk about things like genetic drift and inbreeding and all the other mechanisms, the example I use for inbreeding is we do the genetics of Game of Thrones. Like
Oh.
we do the Lannisters and we do like we map it out and we're like this is what's going on, and if Ned Stark had had a basic understanding of Mendelian genetics, that series would already be done. We wouldn't be waiting on book 6, right?
Right.
And like everyone, you know, can grab onto that, right? And that's really cool and fun. But like trying to do that at scale and get, you know, the general population involved is challenging when you have an entire like right-wing propaganda apparatus. One of its jobs is the opposite of that. Right? That like the goal is to tear down science as a way of understanding the world, and we're fighting back against that. And there's no like easy answer to that. We just have to like persevere and be good at it. But then there's a second dimension to that, because that's just like the communication, get people interested and teach people stuff side of it. There's also the debate side of it. And the debate side of it is completely separate from science communication, because when you're debating any of these guys, you're not really trying to convey the science. It's a performance, and you're competing in terms of your performance. And like we've been saying, Donnie is really good, to his credit, of making arguments that sound persuasive if you don't know what all the words mean.
Right.
Right? That's the thing. His argument sounds great to people who don't know what all the words mean. So doing, you know, like we could sit here for an hour and like draw out phylogenetic trees and show how they're incompatible with the flood story, but that's not going to be persuasive in a debate setting. In a debate setting, like you just have to be better at it and make them look dumb. So,
Yeah.
you know, you have to be quick, you have to know inside out what they're going to say, and you just have to put on a better show and show that like you, one, know it better than they do, two, know their arguments better than they do and can counter them, and three, can ask them questions that they can't answer. Because, like Max, like you said, in that debate from however many weeks ago, he kept coming back to this Y chromosome thing because they didn't have an answer for it, right? If there had been if they could answer that, but there was something else, then he would have come back to that other thing. It's about hammering the thing that they can't answer. So the response to that is, I'm going to make you answer a question that I know you can't answer. And I'm just going to keep asking it over and over again. And that's going to convey that, oh, the evolution side really knows their stuff and they have answers to these questions, and the creationists don't have answers to those questions, therefore they're wrong. Right? And it's all about that show, that performance. I mean, this is why Dwayne Gish was so good at what he did, right? He was a brilliant debater, even though he was dishonest as anything. It didn't matter. That's not the point. You know, we're not doing Oxford debates on YouTube here.
In this, we were all left with, well, the evolution proponents did a fairly decent job, but Donnie just whacked them with experience and with debate strategies
That's
and
it.
so on.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much the consensus that we all had after that debate. Given that you mentioned Erica, any thoughts on what she's doing with Will Duffy? I find that extremely interesting.
I want to see where it goes. I think it's really interesting. I think so. Just in terms of like a lesson in science, fantastic. Just
Yes.
like a basic intro to like kind of the development of science as a discipline and the field of biology, and then this the one from just yesterday on is basically an introduction to genetics. Fantastic. It's the kind of thing it takes me. Oh, that stuff we would probably that spans 3 or maybe 4 classes for me when I do it. And
Hmm.
so getting that in that amount of time that clearly is wonderful. So if nothing else, it's doing a great job pulling in an enormous audience of people just getting a basic overview of bio, and that's fantastic. There's that's great. I don't know if anything's going to come of it with Will. The little thing he did yesterday where he kind of started with this little like design argument
Yeah.
presentation that he did, all of that stuff for anyone who's like follows this debate obsessively, let's say, like I do, all that stuff is familiar going back to like the 90s, right? All of that stuff
Uh-huh.
is, it's baby's first design argument. It's stuff that like William Dembski was writing about in the 90s. And so we'll see if he clearly is very well informed on what the creationist arguments are, but then there were lots of times where Erica was explaining basic bio and he's like, "Oh, I had no idea." Like, well, okay, that's I think a time for some self-reflection there, right? If you're really well versed on why this stuff is wrong, but don't know the basics of the science, maybe that tells you something about your media diet and, your social media bubble, right?
I think he got accused a lot of when it came out that he was a younger creationist. He got accused a lot of being the same as a flat earther, but applied to
Yeah,
evolution. And I
it's
think that
true.
clicked on him, which is true, right?
It's true. It's as I don't know if you know Dapper Dinosaur, but
Yes.
he has said that young Earth creationists are just flat earthers who are better at geography.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like, yeah, that's true.
Clive thinks that Will has an agenda. That means he will reject the conclusions. I would like to think of it a little bit more gracefully and grant him some grace in that at the end of this, there will be no freaking way that he will still claim create non-evolution.
I
But
I'm I'm interested to
wishful
see.
thinking.
I
Yes.
well look, I think he gets some credit because he did change his mind on the flat earth stuff, right? Like he did, if you're going to like go and do the experiment for real and then you're going to see the results and change your mind, then that for me that gets you a lot
Oh, but
of
he
credit.
wasn't a flat earther. He
Oh,
didn't change his mind. He was always a glober. He
I
started
thought he
doing
was.
that. No, he started doing that because one of his friends, Wendy, I think it was her name, she was a flat earther, and he wanted to prove to her that
Got it.
that it's
Okay.
incorrect.
Okay. I thought see this is just me not knowing the backstory of all this because
Uh,
I go out of my way to not pay attention to flat earthers. I just can't. I cannot deal with like that is a level of nonsense I can't deal with. I just can't. I
I love it.
maybe
It's so much fun.
maybe at some point I'm gonna have to change as it somehow becomes more popular, but for now I don't have to worry about
Oh,
like the reflections of Chicago and the whatever on the lake. Like I get it. I know why. I know the argument, and I never have to actually articulate it because I just don't engage with that. And for now, that's where I'm good. So I didn't.
if
Okay, so now I
he
thought got
like
it.
threw a grenade on that, so you won't have to worry about it. We got you. We got you
Yeah, well,
covered.
right now we can just point to the final experiment, and that's
Yeah,
that. As though we
pretty
couldn't
much.
previously point to like all of the pictures of Earth taken from space, but
Yes, because those get hand wave dismissed pretty much in the same way, and I think it's very analogous when we have a reference of particularly the flat Earth because the mechanisms are the same. It's hand wave dismissing or specifying and latching on to a very tiny
teeny
aspect
little
of
thing. Yep.
yes, and it's like
Yeah.
this is the key. This is the key that undoes everything. It's like, well, no, because you're just wrong. And I think it's very analogous. I have a couple more messages. I don't know how much time you have, but
I'm here. This is great.
oh, yeah, I'm
Let's
having
do
so
it.
much fun, and I wanted to thank you for that. Earthly Skeptic became a member. Thank you so much for that. Real Cygnus asked,
No.
they have a model. And one of the telltale signs for me, and I'll let you answer right after, is, for example, when they make the analogy of the cars and the similarities in design with cars, and my layman answer to that is like, hey, Donnie, cars don't reproduce, and there is
Yeah.
a reason why engineers do things similarly is because it's the most optimal way to do stuff. But that does not correlate to like nature.
Right. And if you actually look at cars and like actually compare the parts in like the same way you would compare, genomes, they actually don't form a nested hierarchy. They
Right.
don't. Like they just don't. So, the analogy falls apart in every way, but the main response is, okay, that's great, cars don't reproduce. The whole point is that the pattern we see is a prediction of heredity. Cars don't
Right.
have heredity, so it's irrelevant to what we're talking about.
Right. Paul, how many women did Noah have on his boat with him? His wife and the 3
Yeah.
wives of his sons.
Yeah. So
But
it's 8 people
the
total.
important ones are the 3 wives, because those are the ones that continued having kids down below.
Yep, and
PhD
that's where
Tony-
the mitochondria come from.
Yeah. PhD Tony said, my academic specialty is paleo sea level. This is not how I would attack the Noah myth. And I saw your response that there's so many ways to debunk. Which one is your favorite?
Oh, so what's the specifically for the flood? I mean, the best is the heat problem, right? You can't beat the heat problem. That is the best. Like you're going to vaporize. You're going to turn the entire surface of the planet into plasma. Like that's the ball game, folks. We're done.
Hold on to your hats, because on this debate that caused this stream, Romat says that he
they got a
solved
solution.
the
Yeah.
heat problem by absorbing the heat into the core and radiating it into space.
Right, and so the heat, as it's moving back through the crust and then through the water, somehow neither of those things absorb any of that heat on its pathway out to space. Yeah, okay, Romat,
Yep.
thanks.
Yes.
Yes.
That is just like, oh, that sounds like not possible.
Yeah, I thermodynamics would like a word with that one. Thank you.
Robin said, but have you considered magic? Yes, we always
I keep telling creationists, look, just put all your miracles into the flood. Just say the whole flood, top to bottom, was a miracle. The water, where it came from, the heat, how we got rid of it, all of it, how the boat was protected from the heat, everything. Just, it's all miraculous. Done. Move on.
If you start trying to explain it, then that's when they fail every time.
And that's why they shouldn't even try to explain it. They should just say the whole flood was a miracle top to bottom. No, I will not be taking any more questions at this time. Thank you.
Right. Unfalsifiable, and we can leave it at that. It's not science, it's your faith. That's fine. If you take that position, that's fine.
That's it. Just do that.
Eric Burns, talking about when we were mentioning science education and that kind of stuff, the high school astronomy class I teach is almost all lectures, so my students can be off. Damn, I didn't want. He was mentioning how he's surprised that he hasn't received any pushback because he lives on a red state about teaching the Big Bang to high schoolers.
Oh, yeah. Hopefully, as far as I know, they haven't gone after that yet. But, give it time, right? Give it time. We'll get there. I'm just happy I'm in a blue state.
Mr. Gustafson gifted 10 Shadow Mate Talks memberships. Thank you so much. You can now enjoy some of the best emojis out on the internet. Clive Wells said that, in his opinion, Will has an agenda, and that means he will reject the conclusions. I would like to think so, that having seen what he has seen and having been like a week being around Austin Whitsitt, I think he can actually see. But it's just wishful thinking to me.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Guess we'll see. Yes. CJ Lammer, been a member for 4 months. Thank you so much. Here's to many more. Keep up the great work, Max. Love you, buddy. I love you too. Thank you, CJ. All right. After that little intermission, what else is of note when it comes to Donnie's script when talking about evolution? What is the one thing that strikes you the most as the most incorrect, or the one that you like talking about the most?
Yeah, I mean, you could. God, I've seen so many Donnie debates. It's you've got the junk DNA thing where he talks about like herbs are created units of DNA function, which is totally wrong because all the functions require a specific sequence, and there's no selection keeping the sequences the same. That's a really easy one. You've got anything with like mutation rates and mitochondrial DNA. All of that is wrong, and they've done that. You know, they do their pedigree mutation rate thing. Rawmat loves that one. Let's see. They've got the obviously Donnie loves the structural stuff with the Y chromosome, and we talked about why that's silly because it's like we're going to give the Y chromosome its own special standard that we don't use anywhere else when we do these comparisons. You do the comparison correctly, and you get the pattern you expect to get. What else is in there? Let's see. He talks about the chromosome 2 fusion and that it's not a fusion. There's, genes spanning it that's wrong. In the most recent assembly for the genome, the gene that previously spanned the site, it looked like it the ancestral form was only on one side, but it may have acquired a start site on the opposite side. That's actually not there. That was an artifact of the sequencing. It's not there anymore. So that argument goes away.
So they're appealing to a technical error on the tech used originally.
It was
with better tech. It's no longer there.
Yeah, so you go by the Human Genome Project, right? The Human Genome wasn't done when they finished the Human Genome Project like 25 years ago. At this point, we've been refining it since then, and it's not just having the sequence; it's figuring out what the sequence does, like where are the genes, where are the regulatory pieces, right? And so that process is called genome annotation. And so as we go through and we refine the sequences and we compare them to other things and we assess them biochemically, we can annotate the genome and like describe what each part of it does or doesn't do. So as we refine our genome annotation, there's actually parts that we previously had as doing a thing that no longer do that thing as we've gotten more refined understanding of it. And the chromosome 2 gene is one of those examples, the gene at the fusion site. What else was in there? I should know this
they
off the
talked
top of
about
my head.
ERVs a little bit, and
Oh.
I don't remember the particulars, but apparently they think that they have a defeater for the ERV argument, which I understand the basics of it. I understand the basic idea, but their explanation was not convincing at all. I can't even remember exactly what it was.
So
right now.
what they'll say is that ERVs are, the phrase he always uses is created units of DNA function, is the phrase he uses for ERVs. And he says that they're involved in regulating genes or regulating RNA in terms of like translation, or they're involved in like antiviral functions because were created to match viral sequences to then like inactivate those sequences when the viruses invade your cells. And there's two things to point out with ERVs that invalidate all of that. One is that they don't experience purifying selection, which is selection against mutation. So if you have a mutation and it breaks an important function, then the individual with that mutation will, on average, have fewer kids, right? Because they have some important thing that doesn't work right anymore. They may die or they may not. They'll have fewer kids on average compared to somebody who doesn't have that mutation, right? So that's called purifying selection, right? You can identify the regions of the human genome that have purifying selection, and that basically tells you which parts of the genome where the sequence is actually doing a critical function, right? You need the sequence to stay the same. And if the sequence changes, if it mutates, then there's a cost to that, right? So you can evaluate regions of the genome for purifying selection. There are it's about 200,000, it's slightly more than 200,000 ERVs in the human genome. Almost none of them experience purifying selection. The amount that are under purifying selection is in the probably low double digits out of
Wow.
200,000. 200,000. So if you proposing all of these functions, right? Antiviral functions, regulating translation, gene regulation, whatever. Those functions require specific sequences to work. You have to match the target virus. If the sequence can just mutate without any cost, then you're not doing that function, right? Therefore, well over 99% of herbs are doing none of the proposed functions that creationists say they do. Like, that's it. That's the ball game. But it's even better than that, because you go one level more. Endogenous retroviruses have specific parts. They've got this thing called the LTR, long terminal repeat, on either end, and then they've got 3 genes in between that are the remnants of the viral genes. Most ERVs are missing the genes. They've been deleted because they don't do anything, so when you have little deletions, there's no cost to it, so they stay gone. There's no selection against the deletions.
Right.
So you end up having the vast majority of those 200,000 are either the 2 LTRs back to back with nothing in between, or even better, just a solo LTR on its own. And that solo LTR, the sequence is degraded. It's mutated, so it can't even do the job that an LTR would normally do.
Right.
So what's it doing? It's not doing anything.
That would kind of put a wrench in the whole God used this for a purpose if it's not doing anything actually.
I have a video coming up. It might be my video that I release next week that is going to be on this topic, on junk DNA. And it's the question you can ask to defeat any creationist argument about junk DNA and how there's no junk DNA and herbs aren't junk DNA and this and that. Junk DNA is fake. We're wrong about junk DNA, right? All that stuff is wrong. The human genome is mostly junk DNA, like over 80%. Easy. And the question you can always ask, little preview here, the question you can always ask is, what sequence independent functions does all that DNA do? What functions is it doing that doesn't require a specific sequence? Because only 8% of the human genome has purifying selection, like we talked about a few minutes ago. Only 8% of the genome. So what's the rest doing?
When we talk about junk DNA, is it junk because it doesn't do anything, or what's the definition of junk DNA?
Junk DNA is DNA in your genome that has no function. It's not doing a job that facilitates the survival of the organism.
Okay.
Right? It's DNA that just sits there and it gets replicated, but it's not affirmatively doing anything to like help your physiology in any way, right? It's not doing anything for you. It just sits there and it gets replicated, and sometimes it even gets transcribed to RNA. Sometimes there are these things called transposons that like copy and paste themselves all over your genome. That's like 45% of your DNA is these little genomic parasites, right? Like, that's all junk because it's not doing a function for you. And one of the ways we can tell if it's doing a function is there a cost to getting rid of it? And we can do, in mice, for example, you can delete millions and millions of base pairs in mice. You can't do this in humans, obviously, but millions and millions of base pairs in mice, no cost.
The mice continues being a mouse.
Right, they're totally, and they can reproduce, and their kids are fine, right? And so it's, if the argument is that the vast majority of the genome is functional, then why can we cut out tens of millions of nucleotides from mice and they're fine? It's not doing anything.
And this goes into the genetic technologies and so on. For a layperson, do you think that when they talk about the ERVs, that bringing up the Phoenix virus that got kind of remade, do you think that's a valid argument? Because that was the rebuttal that the guys had during this debate.
So is that the virus that they
That
reactivated from the endogenous
reactivate
retrovirus?
from the ERVs. Yes.
Right, so that's a good right. So there are examples of that where you can basically fix the broken ERVs and make it a real virus again, and that's really strong evidence that it was a virus. But you don't even have to do anything that complicated because there's a telltale sign of viral insertion, and it's called a target site duplication, where when the virus puts itself into your DNA, the site where it cuts and pastes gets duplicated. So you have your little ba 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 XYZ ba 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 ba. If it cuts at that XYZ, you end up with an XYZ on either end of the virus. And so we could actually see this happening where there are active endogenous retroviruses in koalas is the best studied example, where you could actually find sites in the genome that are specific to different lineages of koalas, where all the rest don't have that particular insertion, where all the rest have just the one sequence, but the ones that have the ERV at that site have the duplication. And you can look at the human ERVs, and what do we see for all those 200,000 human ERVs? Target site duplications.
Wow.
So dead to rights, they weren't put there. They came from a virus. Now, if the argument is, well, God could have done it that way, great. God could have created the world 5 minutes ago and implanted us with our memories, and here we are, and we would never know the difference, right? Unfalsifiable.
Mm-hmm. Unfalsifiable.
Once you go to God could have done it that way, the argument is over.
But even if we grant the God argument for a second, why would God make why would God make junk DNA with no purpose? Because a designer, in general, when we're talking about specifically intentional design, you don't put stuff in a car that is not that has no purpose. I think of Formula One cars, the most technological of things, right?
Right. Every
they don't
little
put stuff
thing
that is not meant.
Yep.
And it's all intended for something. It's not just, you can't just trim the fat of a Formula One car. It will not work.
I was reading a microbiologist, I forget who it was, but they said regarding the relative simplicity of a prokaryotic cell, they'd say, look, I would be honored to have been on the committee that designed the E. coli cell. I would never once in a million years admit to being on the committee that designed the human body. Right? It's
yes.
Right. Our genome is a mess. Our morphology doesn't work the way it should. Right. It's dumb. And you can say, oh, you can't say what God would have done. How can you evaluate, oh, God wouldn't have done it that way? Fair point. Then you, creationists, can't say, God would have reused designs, and that explains the pattern of similarity that we see. That argument cuts both ways. If I'm not allowed to say God wouldn't do it that way, you're not allowed to say God would do it that way. So pick your poison, guys.
That is the kind of argument that I usually, because as a simpleton, that is the kind of argument that I usually go to. It's you're talking about this perfect creation and so on, and we can choke on our own saliva.
Right? Yeah.
What?
That's so dumb. Yeah. And look, I am perfectly open to the. You can't evaluate how a supernatural creator would have done it and why they would have done it that way. Fair point, but then neither can you.
Right, but if I can think of a better design so that our breathing tube doesn't go through our food tube, that when you're eating barbecue, if it has a little bit of skin, you can just literally choke to death.
Right.
But that kind of defeats the whole argument of, oh yeah, this omnipotent thing can't make. And the one that I use, because it's one of my areas of expertise, is I'm bilingual in Spanish and English, right? I can create a text that translates perfectly from one language to the other and back, and I'm just a human, and I can do that perfectly. Why is it that we have the linguistic problems with all of the holy books, that it always ends up to, oh, no, but you don't speak the original language, so you can't
interpretation,
know.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Way outside of my area of expertise, but anytime those arguments come up, it's like, fine. Nobody can say what God would have done. Great. I can tell you what evolution would have done.
Right, because we made a
you know,
prediction.
so Because
We
then
follow the evidence.
because then the creationists are stuck having to defend their model, and that's actually a really good tactic, talking about like debate stuff. Like,
Mhm.
I always hate these debates where it's like, is there evidence for evolution? Everyone stop doing that. Stop participating in debates where it's the onus is on the evolutionists to be on defense. No, 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 no. I want to see a debate on MDD that's, is there evidence for creation? Could the flood work, right? Does AIG's genealogy model work, right? Let's make them actually defend their models for a change instead of always just throwing stones, right?
Right.
Defend your model, because you want to say like, whatever, oh, evolution can't explain XYZ. I bet it can. I bet I could explain it. It's just,
Do you know what I think would be fascinating? Have a Jewish person debate a Christian on this,
ooh,
because
that
this
would
is
be
Jewish
interesting.
mythology.
Yeah.
But what does a Jew think about this? Having an atheist debate it doesn't really mean all that much, but it's far more interesting if you have someone who's actually invested in this cosmology and see how it differs, because it differs greatly. And I think that would be really fascinating.
That would be interesting. Yeah. I'd watch that, maybe.
Oh, I think you would have a great time, because a lot of Jewish people are already very focused on scientific reasoning. So they would be like, yeah, this is a metaphorical narrative, and it actually is consistent with the rest of the Torah. And also, for a Jewish person, the Torah does not promote Jesus or anything like that. So it's very reading this text as a Jewish person versus reading this text as a Christian person, it becomes almost a completely different book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that is really fascinating.
Yeah, again, not my field, but I do know a little bit. I know there's a robust historical tradition of Jewish atheists, which seems like a contradiction, but actually isn't. But like
It's not. You're
like
correct.
that is right. That is like there is a robust intellectual tradition of that thing. Which so that would be a really interesting discussion to see.
Yeah, that's what Robin said just
Yeah,
now. Because they're ethnically Jewish, but they don't believe in God. So,
but guess what? You could be religiously Jewish and still
atheist.
be an atheist. It's actually what Dr. Dan is saying. It is that these are people who practice Judaism but don't believe in God. They go to the synagogue, they do all the stuff, but they don't believe God is real. It's really it's different than any other kind of tradition. We're not just talking about cultural people. We're talking about religious Jews.
Actual, it's a really interesting thing. Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I think those were all the big topics covered. It was an interesting an interesting debate. We haven't had one of those on MDT in a while.
Yeah.
And it's always interesting. I did debate this evidence of God guy on the actual myth of the flood. That was a lot of fun, because he's just invented stuff out left and right, and like I had read the myth just before the debate happened, because I went in kind of last minute as a replacement, and the guy was like saying stuff that was nowhere in the text, and that was fun. That was funny, and then I had an evolution debate with him, and also with Sal, and of course I tried my best, but I'm a layman, and what I tried to do was bring it to the one thing that they say doesn't happen, which is human evolution. Right. And
that's the one thing they can't allow under any circumstances. Yeah.
Yes. And it's a couple of papers from some tree climbing pygmies that are getting morphological changes in their feet, and the Bahau the water nomads of Southeast Asia. Do you think that if you had to make a case for human evolution, what route would you go down?
Human evolution. So human evolution is, I don't know how anybody can look at the evidence and dispute human evolution. Also not specifically my field, but this one I actually know enough about to not sound like an idiot on. So first thing is you've got fossils, right? You have a pattern of fossils where you go from more ancestral to more derived, right? You've got more, as creationists would say, more ape-like to more human-like, right?
Mhm.
The real way to describe that is you go from ancestral to derived traits, right? So you're on all fours with a small brain and kind of a protruding face to upright with a big brain and a flat face. That's generally the trend. You see these fossils in a progression over time and then also geologically overlapping. So they overlap in time and location, and you see this very clear progression over time. And then once you get to recent enough, like into genus Homo, where we can start to get DNA sequences, then, forget about it, right? We can sequence the Neanderthals, we can sequence the Denisovans, and we can reconstruct that phylogenetic tree, and we could correlate the genetics with the fossil evidence, and it all tells us the same thing. And not just in terms of the when, but also the where, which is about East Central Sub-Saharan Africa. It's like modern day, like Ethiopia, give or take. And every genetic metric, you're talking about just raw allelic diversity, heterozygosity, linkage equilibrium, and phylogenetic nesting, all points us back basically to modern day Ethiopia as the epicenter of the radiation, right? And there's that evidence is rock solid, and you've got tons of creationist attempts to like undo that, and they range from very sophisticated, from like the professionals like Dr. Rob Carter, where he's wrong, but he's like trying to construct some semblance of a genetic model that would get you to the same place with a different history. The problem with that is that when you tweak one thing, you end up making another problem worse. So, like, for example, you can say there's a higher mutation rate in sub-Saharan populations, and that explains greater diversity. Okay, fine, but that disrupts the linkage equilibrium. And now that breaks it, that's now in contradiction with this other aspect of the data. The other side of that is to be very ham-fisted about this, and you see this with like Donnie, where he'll just be like, oh, it points to like an African/Middle Eastern origin. Well, Egypt is Africa, and that's right next to the Middle East, and we say it came from the Middle East, so samesies. And it's just like very ham-fisted, trying to like squish two regions of the world together that are not adjacent to each other.
Right.
There's no way, though. There's just no way. Looking at the fossils plus the DNA tells you the time and the place, and there's no way to come to any other conclusion. It's just silly.
All right. I have one more question that it's not particularly, I don't remember if it got brought up on this debate. Is the whole soft tissue with the T-Rex kind of a thing? I've read some stuff
No.
and I couldn't really understand it, but I know they're lying about it. I just don't know exactly where.
So there's a couple levels to this. First is that they'll say, oh, look, the cells are spongy, they're elastic, whatever. Those samples that they're talking about are not found in the ground. Actually, there's three things. There's the bison horn that they say was a T-Rex, and then there's what I call, from Dr. Joel Duff, the collagen challenge. So first, there's the samples that were processed, and then they say, oh, look what they found. And it's like, no, they were soaking in acid for like 36 hours or something. If you, like, my tissue, like, think about, like, if you take anything and soak it in acid for 36 hours, it's probably going to be a little bit softer than when you started, right? As I forget who said it, but somebody talking about this was like, look, if you soak me in acid for 36 hours, I'm going to be really soft at the end of those 36 hours, okay? Right? So that's the first thing, is that like the Mary Schweitzer famous papers where like they ignore the processing, right? They just pretend that she pulled the stuff out of the ground and it was like spongy, and it's like no, it was processed in the lab, right? So that's one. It
had to be defossilized, sort of, right?
Right, you had to strip away the mineralization, right? So that's one. The second thing is there's a supposed Triceratops horn that one guy found that I forget who it was. God, I should remember his name. But it's a bison horn. Like, it's a bison horn. It's not a Triceratops horn. It's a bison horn. Like, just straight up. And that's just like such a funny, stupid thing. And then the third thing is what Dr. Joel Duff calls the collagen challenge, which is, they say, we found collagen, we found blood cells, we found hemoglobin, no, it's the hemoglobin challenge, sorry, it's the hemoglobin challenge. And we found hemoglobin, we found collagen, we found that, no, what you found are the products of the chemical decay of those molecules, right? We're not finding these long chains of collagen. We're finding the remnants of collagen after it breaks down. We're not finding hemoglobin. We're finding the chemical byproducts of this very stable chemical group that is part of the hemoglobin protein. Right? We're not finding intact hemoglobin. We're finding the remnants of what's called the heme group, the part that has the iron atom in it. We're finding like the remnants of that part of the molecule. And creationists will just be like, we found hemoglobin, we found red blood cells. No, we didn't. Just straight up, no, we didn't. We find the biochemical degraded products of the molecules.
Right.
Like, it's not the same thing. So the first thing for creationists here is just stop lying about it. Just like accurately present what the findings are. Just start there.
Right. So if you start with a straw man, then you can just build whatever the hell you
You
want.
can say whatever you want, yeah. But like, just start there with here's what we found, because the stuff that we found is super cool. And if there are any like little bits of polypeptide, that means we could hypothesize what the dinosaur DNA sequence was. We can say, here are the range of possibilities, and then we can compare them to modern things, which is super cool. And creationists could talk about that, and that would be awesome. But that's not what they want to talk about. They want to say, we found T-Rex blood cells or whatever, which we haven't done, which is just not true.
Just the funny thing is that just the existence of those fossils basically debunks the whole creationism argument on its face.
Yeah.
It would mean that God created it.
Look,
with bones fossilized, already buried there. It makes no sense.
They'll all say though that like dinosaurs were on, like non-avian dinosaurs were on the ark. So okay, we've got Neanderthal DNA, we've got woolly mammoth DNA. Why don't we have T-Rex DNA? Right. Why don't we find like mummified remains that we can extract DNA from? We got a full human genome or a full Homo genome from a tooth from a cave in Siberia. Why don't we have T-Rex DNA? Because they didn't live 40,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, right? They lived 65 million years ago. That's why. It's a totally different thing. If they existed as recently as they say, we should be swimming in dinosaur DNA.
And one would think that somewhere we would find a frozen one completely like intact, just frozen there.
Right. Or one that you talk about like rapid burial kind of situation. Why don't we have evidence, for example, from the Cambrian of trilobites that are all at once killed in a landslide, right?
Right.
Why don't we have that for dinosaurs with like DNA that we can extract? Because landslides were happening 4,000 years ago. That's a thing. So why don't we have that? The answer is because it wasn't from 4,000 years ago, right? It's silly. We have all of this stuff from recent specimens we can get DNA out of. We can get proteins out of. If dinosaurs were that recent, it should be the same.
And you mentioned that what we're doing with finding this and rethinking, basically that there are ways that soft tissue could be fossilized. That is massively cool. And it happens the same thing with with flat earthers. We are finding stuff that is immensely cool all over the universe, and they're like, no, bro, nope. It's flat with a dome. We're a snow globe, and that's. But it's like, why would you want the world to be like that? The universe to be just that boring and dull?
Yeah, it's fundamentally an anti-science position, right? There's the lack of curiosity, the lack of interest in the scientific accuracy, the scientific method. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Isa, I need to go to the toilet for a second. Do you have any questions? And if not, we have some more messages and we'll wrap it up. Dan, I'll be right back.
Yeah. So in doing your educational pursuit in your educational journey, what is kind of one of the most difficult hurdles you've had in educating? Like, what is one of the biggest kind of spaces of misinformation or disinformation that you see within the realm of education.
Yeah, so like you mean like in bio or in terms of like learning and how people should approach complex topics?
I was thinking primarily science within the bio
Yeah,
realm.
so I mean like I teach all the fun stuff, right? I teach evolution. I teach just next week I'm gonna talk about global warming and climate change, right? I One thing we do a couple different times in the my two main semesters is sex determination in humans and human genetics and stuff. So like we're going to talk about the complexity of human sex determination and how it is obviously not a strict binary. And so I get to step into all the fun topics. And obviously there's all this misinformation out there. I talk about vaccines. Like I do a whole thing on vaccines when we talk about the immune system and adaptive immunity. And so I get to talk about like all these fun controversial things, and we're seeing like all these attacks on higher education, and it's like, no, this is part of my syllabus. Like you can't tell me not to teach this. Like this is all part of a robust bioeducation. So I get to push back on all that stuff, which is always fun.
Yeah, that is a really big problem that we see today. Give me 1 second here. We have Robin been a member for 2 months. Awesome guest, Mac, isn't he? It was.
Thank you.
This is lovely. That was fantastic. Mr. Gustafson for 100 sex. That's a lot of sex. That's a dope shirt. Yes, love it. Max gifted 20 Yerba Mate Talks memberships. That is
20.
awesome. Thank you so much for that. And Mr. Gustafson for 100 more sex says Dick Wayne is dumb. Yeah, but
Don't use that word.
You're embarrassing me in front of my friend, my new friend. Yes. Earthly Skeptic said, "Hey, Dan is my hero. Thanks for having him here."
Thank you.
Oh, that is so good.
I just you should have aspire to have better heroes.
So humble. Can we get a humbly bro spam emojis in the chat? Yes. Brilliant for $5 Australian. Thank you so much. Q for Dan. How far back do we have to go for failing to extract human blood from bones compared to what Mary Schweitzer did?
So blood, I have no idea. DNA, I know we can do tens of thousands of years. You can get reliable DNA sequences, 20, 30, maybe more thousand years. Probably not 100,000, but I wouldn't be shocked if we did. Blood is a lot more fragile, right? Because now you're talking about membranes and stuff, and they dry out and everything. Blood, I would think you'd have to be much more recent than that, but I wouldn't want to put a number on it because I just don't know enough chemistry. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. Albino Bat Guy for $2. Dr. Dan is like Professor Dave, but nice.
Professor Dave is also nice. If you've ever talked to Professor Dave, he's very nice. He's just mean to you if you lie about science. And like, I can't fault him for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's different, styles. I am kind of like that. I can be super nice, amenable, and so on. But there's also clips of me being absolutely vicious and destroy people when they lie, especially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
All right. Isa, anything else before we wrap it up?
I think I'll present the other side of that question about just in learning. What do you think is one of the greatest kind of hurdles?
I think the hardest thing is just learning how to learn, like using the right approaches to learning new things is a skill that you have to practice, right? It's you can't just, most people can't just read a book and like get it. You have to practice doing whatever it is. And this is something that we talk about in my class. We talk about how we start the semester with neuroscience and how brains work and how you form new memories. And then we go to bio, but with the foundations of bio with like chemistry and molecules and stuff. But we start with how learning works. And getting that across is so hard. And in terms of things like using active learning practices and spacing out your preparation, right? Instead of like studying for 8 hours for the 2 days before the exam, right? No, give me half an hour a day for 2 weeks. It's going to be way more effective, And just like one, learning to use those approaches myself took a really long time, but then trying to convey that to students and get the students to buy in, because a lot of students, they come out of high school, they didn't really have to try that hard. So getting them to change gears in a college setting is challenging, and getting that buy-in is something we always struggle with. Just every semester, we get the new wave coming in. It says, okay, here's what you did in the past. Here's the neuroscience of why it's not going to work now. So here's a better approach, and then we're going to kind of hold your hand and walk you through how to do that and try to show you rather than tell you that it works. And we've gotten better at it over the years I've been doing this. We've gotten a lot better at getting that buy-in, but that's like the most challenging thing, is just learning how to learn and then getting other people to adopt the best practices. It's really tough.
Is it hard with the new low attention span of people?
So everyone's like worried about like the COVID generation and kids. You get a lot of kids these days on like the professor subreddit and everything, and I don't see it. My students, I have some freaking fantastic students every semester, and honestly, they're just getting better and better. A lot of them. I have I have over 900 students this semester. And so the ones that I interact with like regularly, that I kind of get to know, it's only a few dozen out of those 900. But the ones that I've, gotten to know, they're fantastic. They're really good. And even the ones that I don't, know as well, but I interact with sporadically, like they'll ask me a question after class or something, or they'll raise their hand during class. These are not like, I don't understand this kind of questions. These are like good questions where they're thinking about it and then trying to take the next step. So, I don't see this like COVID generation, TikTok generation thing that people are worried about. I think my students are great, honestly, and it's a pleasure. I love my job, and I love getting to, present this stuff to these giant audiences 4 times a week, and then get really interesting questions back. And then we can kind of put together what we know and try to figure it out. And I think they're great. Yeah.
Interesting. That's a great response. Thank you so much. One final message for you. Still CTJW. Thanks for stopping in and informing us. If you guys could share Dan's link, our channel is so much smaller, but if you haven't subscribed, check it out.
Subscribe to this channel. Well, sure, here, subscribe probably.
Yes, that one. All right, before we go, people, make sure to do the social thing is like, share, subscribe, send this to a friend, send this to your significant other, go to the corner, yes, the corner of your street, and just subscribe to Creation Mist and Yerba Mate Talks. And that way we can share the love for the channel. Tomorrow we have a debate between OTW, the guy that debated Jaren, and Reds on what flat Earth versus globe, what does comport best with reality. So you don't want to miss that. Dan, thank you so much. This was absolutely fantastic. You cleared all of my doubts regarding that debate, and I love acquiring that kind of knowledge. So this was great. Thank you so much for this.
You're
Anything
welcome.
You would like to promote?
And no, I just want to say thank you for having me on. This was a super fun conversation. It's a pleasure meeting the two of you. This was great. I would be happy to do this again at some point. If you got a creationist debate you want to talk about, I'm happy to dissect it with you if you want.
Perfect.
I will
keep that in mind, definitely.
I've got stuff coming. I try to release a video every Wednesday night. I've been keeping that up for a couple of years now. I'm very proud of myself for it. They're not always the most involved videos, but I try to put something out there that people can learn a little bit of bio and use against creation science every week, every Wednesday. So keep an eye. Wednesday evenings, Eastern U.S. time is my release. So and then I every now and then do stuff kind of in between as little things pop up. But I got a junk DNA thing coming up. I've got a I don't even know. I've got a few things that are outlines. I've got one thing recorded that's not up yet. I got to edit it. I got stuff coming. It'll help people, fight creationists. So check it out.
Perfect. We surely like that. Well, this was great. Thank you, everyone, for being here. All of us here on stage and everyone over there in the side chat. This was lovely. We'll catch you tomorrow. Take care. Have a great night.